There we go. All right, now we're live. And now we are on. There we go. All right, let's go. Everybody got their notebooks ready? So the pictures I asked everybody to send, right? You're taking the 2D scene of your own design and converting it into 3D as a way to sort of see that everybody has more experience creating things in 2D than in 3D, but it's not a huge barrier. With some simple strategies, you can get some 3D shapes going fairly quickly. Let's do reference first. So part of the reason this also works well is that we already have 2D images of the stuff we want to make because we made them for the previous assignment, right? And so we can work from that here. And obviously when you're working with reference, I mean, you want to look at the reference and look at the thing. But we can bring the reference into Cinema 4D in a couple ways. Let's do, which one of these do we want to do first? We'll do the hot air balloon first. Okay, the hot air balloon, let's look at this image. So depending on the shape that you want to make and the properties of that shape, that's going to determine what technique, what approach you use for bringing this object into 3 dimensions, right? So the first thing you need to think about is this object have radial symmetry, right? Radial meaning, is it rounded, right? So pumpkin, radial symmetry. This balloon, radial symmetry, right? It's not this shape that's just extruded flat. That would be like a balloon cookie or something like that, right? But how about the basket? Does that have radial symmetry? No, it's just a box, right? Like essentially a stylized box of some kind. So let's look at this. We want to bring this in so we can use it as a guide for our creation. The way I usually work is that I bring it in as a background in one of the orthographic views. And so in this case, we have it from the side. And so I'm going to put it, I guess I'll put it over here on the right side. And we're going to Shift V, which brings up our view options. So that's one to make sure you remember, right? So Shift V, this is the options for everything having to do with how the viewport looks, right? So this is the viewport options. And in our case, because we're not really worried about rendering in Cinema 4D, the most important one here is that there's a tab called Background to bring in a background image. Let's do it. And so Shift V brings this up, right? And this is the viewport properties. And if we look here, there is a background tab. I'm going to select that. And you see that there is a field to bring in an image right here. Let's do it. Let's come down here to Downloads. Hot air balloon. Bring this in. And now that's in the background there. Usually, I want to, you can move it if you need to. It's going to come in centered by default. In most instances, we want to start thinking about anchor points, right? That's going to be one of the things that you want to make sure you have right going out of Cinema 4D. Let's make a note of that, because that's incredibly important. Because when you use a sprite, you can change the anchor point in Unity. When you're using a mesh, you cannot change the anchor point in Unity, right? And this makes it super important that we get the anchor point correct in Cinema 4D before we send it over. Otherwise, you got to go back and fix it and send it back over. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you want to get that adjusted. With that in mind, here, I'm going to go ahead and move the balloon up so that the bottom of the basket is sitting at 0. That way, when I go to create this, right, it will make most sense for the anchor point to be at the bottom of the basket. If it needs to land, right, that makes the most sense for this. And so that's why I'm moving this up. So I'm just starting there from a reference. And then I almost always turn up the transparency, which is kind of a strange slider, but just to make it a little bit fainter so we can see what we're doing. So Shift V for viewport, and you can load it into the background. And you could do this for any of the orthographic views. So you just need to make a decision about what view did I draw this object from. Right? There's a handful of things in your projects that were, for the most part, it was from the side, but some people drew some things from more of like a top-down perspective, in which case you'd probably want to put the image over here, right? So on and so forth. Great. Let's look at this radial symmetry here. And with this in mind, I'm going to start with something with radial symmetry. Let's start with the cylinder and get this dialed in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's kind of 8 stripes. So we can assume it's like, 8 times 2, right? So 16 the whole way around. Again, you drew these things. You're not beholden to them. Feel free to adjust the designs as needed, right? But we're just using this as a starting point because, A, we have all this reference, and it'll just give you some practice going through the whole process. So let's go to the cylinder. Let's change it to 16, which it is by default. Let's move this into the right zone. Let's try and make sure we're going to need to smooth this out. And so anytime we're going to be smoothing, we want to make sure we have the least amount of polygons that we can use here at the beginning. And there we go. So the drawing's a little bit off center. Again, it's a guide, right? It's not, we're not manufacturing this. So let's get that, and let's make it a little bit bigger. Maybe about like there. Cool. Now we need to pull the top up, right? And pull the bottom down to get the similar shape. And so let's do that. I don't see the polygons. How can I see them? NB. Great. And now I need to start manipulating the polygons, so I need to press what button, Moses? Yeah. That one? Doesn't work yet. Why not?
Is it because you have to select the points first? Oh, C.
That's right.
C.
Yep. Before these work, you got to press C, right, to convert it to a polygonal object. Let's make sure I didn't move it off axis. So the X and the Z. So let's hit C on it. There we go. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's learn something right now. So, especially with objects like this, look at this. I'm going to go ahead and say UL to select a loop, and then I'm going to press E. And removing this, let's just do this like this. I want to move these up. So let's look at it from here. Move this up a little bit. Hit T. Bring this down. So a lot of times here we're doing this. We're sort of looking at it in one view and manipulating it in another view. And then here at the bottom, we need more polygons. I'm going to hit D for extrude. And again, I would select here and then extrude down here. I need to make these smaller, T, and bring this in. So when I hit T, I want to make sure I'm not smushing it like this. That's not what I want, right? And so when I hit T, I'm just off the axis so that I scale in all three directions at the same time to keep the radial symmetry. And now we need to smooth this out. What was the object we used for smoothing for our donut? What is this object called? That's right. This adds more polygons and smooths it out. And how do I use this thing? There it is, but it's not doing anything. That's right. It's a green one. The green objects almost always need stuff underneath them to do what it is they're doing. Let's put this in here. There we go. And so you see that that adds more polygons, smooths this out. And now you can use the selections here to sort of scale this a little bit. So I'm going to come in here. I don't need to add any more polygons, but I kind of want to make some of these bigger. Another really great tool to use, I want to get all of the polygons that go the whole way around. And so I'm going to come in here to, you got to make sure you have the cylinder selected. I'm going to say UL. This is a super good one. This is loop selection. See how it goes the whole way around the object? And as I mouse over different polygons, it finds a loop. Now, it's not magic. If your object doesn't have a clean loop the whole way around, it will not work right? It's not going to make a loop the whole way around. And so this is also a good diagnostic tool. You want loops like this. They're called edge loops. In general, symmetrical edge loops that go around the parts of your object are good. That's better modeling practice. So if this isn't working, then you have a problem. So in here, hit T, scale this out, make that a little bit fatter there, and come down here. And that's good, but I want to flatten this one out. And so the subdivision surface, the way it works is that it smooths in between edges, right? So here's an edge, and you see it's smoothing in between those two things, right? It sort of subdivides between this one and this one. So this whole process here, this is all called sub-D modeling, where we use some low poly geometry and then procedural smoothing to make a more smooth shape. In this case, let's go ahead and do one more. We need to add another edge loop here. And let's go ahead and do that. So in order, up until now, when we added geometry, right, we had one tool for that, D, which is the extrude tool. That's the one we use to extrude out the icing, right? Another way to add more geometry is the knife tool, which does exactly what you think it does. It cuts edges into the existing surfaces to give you more geometry. And the one that we're going to use most often, that you're getting used to the fact that these Cinema 4D shortcuts have 2 keys, right? You press one key for the select and then another key for the next, specifically. And so this would be KL. And this is the knife loop, right? The one I just did was UL for loop select, right? That's a select tool, not a geometry tool. But KL works similarly to cut a loop. So KL. And so I'm going to go KL. And now, as I mouse up and down here, you can see I'm able to, the line there is showing me where it's going to cut. And so watch what happens to the shape after I cut this right here. It sharpens up the rounding on this end so that it's it's less rounded here, because it's only rounding between here and here, not between the whole way up there and the whole way down there. And so I put that cut there, and now I'm able to take some of these polygons here at the bottom and move those out. Maybe scale them up a little bit. And if I want to sharpen this up even more, KL, I'm going to put one more right here up against. And that really sharpens that edge. So adding these loop cuts allows you to sort of define the edges of your object, right? This up top, it's nice and smooth because there's only 2 cuts, here and then the very top. At the bottom, we have a bunch of cuts. If we look at the shape without it now, right? That's the shape I ended up with. And so it makes sense, once you get the basic shape roughed out, to get your subdivision surface on the field so that you can see exactly how that's affecting what you're doing. Questions on that so far? Great. Let's save. File, save project as. Let me just make sure the stream is on. Good. Okay, you guys are listening to the stream. Everything's pretty good? Let me know. What shape do we want to use as a starting out point for the basket? Yeah, I mean, I guess I envisioned it being more of like a square. I don't know. I've never been in, who's been in a hot air balloon? Yeah, me neither. Okay, so let's start with a cube. And again, get it as close as we can before we hit C. And so just come in here with the cube, under Object, go to Object Mode. And you see I ended up extruding this a little bit further, so probably gonna have to drop this down. Again, I'm using it as a guide, I don't have to match it exactly. I'm just getting the general gist of it. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. Kind of like so. And in this direction too. Great. Okay, so this is a good starting point. Let's go ahead and hit C on this. Go to polygon mode. We want the top of it to be empty, so I'm just going to delete that polygon so that it's an empty basket. And then, in general, for most things, we'll break this rule actually next, but you don't want to have things that are just one polygon thick for the most part. You want to have them to have, even if they're thin things, you want them to have an inner wall and an outer wall, both of those walls. And so in this case, we can grab all the polygons, hit D, and extrude to create that. You see I'm not getting that inner wall, and the one reason I'm not is because when you extrude all of the faces like that, you have to make sure you check this box right here. So this box right here, create caps. Watch what happens if I check that. Now it makes that inner wall, right? So this is without it, with it. There we go. And let's create that lip. I'm going to go ahead and hit UL for the loop select. Grab that. Bring this up just a little bit. UL again, the whole way around. And then D. Bring that out just a little bit. Turn that back on. So far, so good. This is something we want to have some rounded edges on. So another object that works really well from our purple menu over here. All of these are deformers. You make them a child of geometry. So they change the existing geometry. The subdivision surface makes new stuff based on what you have, right? And so this is the opposite of that. Anyways, the one we're interested in that we're gonna, really the only one you need to worry about between now and Monday is probably the most important one, and that is one I can never find. Oh, right here. Bevel. Bevel is going to round a corner. So our box, we have the right general shape, but it definitely should be, the corners should be rounded, not super sharp, right? This will help it look better when we make it. And so the bevel's super easy to use. We just grab the bevel, and then we make it a child of the thing that we want to round the corners on. We don't want to round the corners of the balloon. It's already nice, it's good, it's rounded enough, right? And so we just drag it below the basket. I'm going to go ahead and label this basket. Okay. And let's look at this. And so this is rounding the corners. Let's come up with some good values to use here. Once you have them, this more subdivisions equals more rounding. Right now we have no rounding because it's at 0. So I'm going to go ahead and say 2. See what that did to the corner right there? We're creating a rounding on the corner. And the offset is how much it rounds. And you don't want to dial that up too much. Okay, here's a problem. So I did it right here. A lot of you guys, this is why your donut got messed up, is that when you're using the extrude tool, you really want to be very precise. And so I accidentally made this extra bit here. Everybody see that? And so let's go ahead and get rid of that. I'm just going to step back to before I extruded, that part of the extrude tool. There we go. Now this bevel will be a little bit cleaner. So the offset is the distance of the rounding. And then I would say everybody always wants to put this at 2 for now. And then the amount, the distance here is going to depend on the size of your object. And so if you go to round too much, you start to see that the roundings kind of like run into each other and then start to run into other parts of the geometry. And that's not good. And so you kind of want to keep it just a little bit there so that that's rounded. Cool. What about the connections here, the strings? What do you think?
Small cylinders?
Yeah, yeah. I think small. In this case, cylinder, but when you use the radial primitives, right, so things that are round, cylinder, there's an oil tank, which is kind of like a rounded thing. You want to decrease the number of rounding subdivisions, right? Because this is going to be a very, very tiny, thin, like, rope. It doesn't need 16 rotation segments. In fact, I'm going to bring it down to 6. And then I doesn't need any segments up and down, and so I'm going to put that at 1. Because I'm going to come in here and bring this way down to right about there and make it shorter. Let's bring it in. And so I want the anchor point to be at the bottom of this so that I can kind of angle it in from where I am. And so I'm going to hit C and go to the anchor point tool. This one right here, the shortcut for the anchor point tool. That's right, L. You got to be careful. It is, you cannot adjust the anchor point on a primitive. So I need to make it not a primitive. I need to make sure I hit C after I get it to the shape that I want so that I can adjust the anchor point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit anchor point now after I hit C, and then move this anchor point down to the bottom. Now turn that off so that anchor point down to the bottom. Make sure I'm in object mode. Now I can rotate from, I'm going to rotate it in kind of like 45 degrees, then up, over, and then maybe in a little bit, like so. Actually, before I rotate it in, I'm going to make some copies. Control drag, control drag, control drag. Let's get these a little bit more organized. Make sense what I'm doing here? Cool. Hot air balloon. All right, so the modeling process, pretty okay, right? We're able to create, we thought about what things are radial symmetry, what things don't, and then just sort of put it together from that point. Make sense? Okay, now let's go ahead and, this is good, I'm saving. However, we need to, first of all, label your parts so that it's easier to know what's going on. I'm sure this isn't called string, but I'm not a ballooner, so I'm not sure. And this is the, I thought I labeled this basket. There we go. Great. So now, what do we need to do for the Unity export? We need to get this ready. We want to apply and label materials. When we do this, we remember we did this on Monday with the donut, right? So we had the donut, the dough material and the icing material. The important part is different material for each section that you want to have a different appearance. Once you bring it into Unity, if you want to change, if the basket and the balloon have separate materials, you make the basket brown, you make the balloon white, you bring it into Unity, and you're like, I want the balloon to be yellow. That's easy. You just change the color of the material in Unity, right? But if you put one material on the basket and the balloon and brought it into Unity, and then you're like, I want the basket to be a different color, that is not, you'd have to go back and fix it at that point. Does that make sense for everybody? Right? And so it's not necessarily that you get the colors totally dialed in. It's just that you make sure that you label it so that there's a separate material for each section. So let's do that. And then we're going to need to put the entire object, or let's just say group the entire object. Right now it's a bunch of different parts. We want to group it under one null. That null needs to have the correct anchor point. In this case, we're going to make it the bottom of the basket. And then we need to export as that's right, FBX. Okay, so this is the top level. Right, I'm done with the modeling process. I'm happy with the shape. We need to get the materials worked out. We need to group it all. Make sure that that object has the, it's under one thing at the top that's labeled with the right anchor point. And then we need to make sure we export as an FBX. Let's do it. Let's get the materials worked out. And so I'll make one material here for the balloon or envelope. What do they call this? I feel like I know this name. I don't know. And then we need to make one for the basket. And then we need to make one for the ropes. There we go. And like I said, let's get some rough colors in here. So for color, this will be some kind of brown for the rope. Maybe more of like a black. There we go. For the basket, we'll make it kind of brown. And for the balloon right now, we'll make it maybe like a green. Maybe like a red. Great. And so let's get this together. I'm going to put the black on the string. Control drag, control drag, control drag. Those are the same. This goes on the basket right here. Nice. This goes on the balloon right there. Next part, get it all together in a group. What is the shortcut for grouping? That's right, Alt-G. Group objects in null. Cool. Alt-G, there we go. And label this. This is balloon. And let's hit E. I need to change that anchor point. I need to hit L to go to anchor point mode. I'm going to go to the side view and drag this down right about there. Come out of anchor point mode. And there we go. Pretty good. I've got this selected. File, export selected object as FBX. In the FBX window, make sure, this one's important, turn off camera and lights so that you don't, otherwise every object you bring in from Cinema 4D will have another camera associated with it, which just is a mess. You only want one camera in your Unity scene. Turn those off. We are not going to be bringing in any animation right now from Cinema 4D. We'll be doing the animating in Unity, so we don't need this either. Just say OK. And let's just put it in here for now and save that. So far, so good? Yeah? Let's look at a slightly different strategy. The palm tree. All right, so this is going to be several shapes, right? We want to have the coconuts, and then the leaf, the main palm tree leaf, and the trunk. Let's look at some strategies here. This will be a little bit different. So which things, the trunk has radial symmetry, right? So this needs to be some sort of radial object that goes the whole way around. If we just sort of scale a sphere a little bit, give it a little bit of shaping, I think we can get to a coconut, right? That's not that far. And then the leaf, T, this is very clever, the way you did it. In this case, I think we want to make one leaf, and then we can sort of duplicate that one to make a whole tree. Does that make sense? Let's look at the trunk and the coconuts first. In this case, I don't know if I need to bring in this for the reference in the background, right? I mean, I think we can just sort of work from what we have. So another object here, you would think out of these objects, you would say cylinder, but we really want this to have more, it would be great to be able to draw the trunk, right? It's like this shape. We can do that. So next to the primitives, this is all splines. Did we talk about this on Monday? Okay, so splines are 2D lines. By themselves, they won't render. They won't be anything. We can use these 2D lines to define the edges or boundaries of 3D shapes. We do that by combining the splines in this menu with these objects over here. So let's look at that. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one. And so if you would just want to draw by hand, there's two options. If you look at this, these are all splines. So the blue ones over here, these are all 2D spline primitives. A circle, right, is a 2D primitive. A sphere is a 3D primitive. These are all the 2D primitives. However, I mean, there's a lot of shapes you can hit here with these things, but a lot of times you just want to draw your own shape. And these two objects, these two tools, right, because they're orange, allow you to do that. The spline pen, if I just select that, works like Illustrator, where you click and drag, and it pulls out a Bezier handle, and you can make your own shape just like the default pen tool in Illustrator, right? Just exactly how that works. You see that makes a spline object over here. The other one that's useful is Sketch. Sketch just allows you to draw a shape, and there's a smoothing. And so I usually turn that up because we want to have less points rather than more. And so I'm able to make a shape pretty easily there. That's not a bad starting point for our trunk, right? And so these over here, there's two of them that we'll look at today that really give you a lot of bang for your buck. The Extrude Object. Okay, we've used the Extrude tool where we extrude as a polygon or set of polygons. The Extrude Object will extrude an entire spline that we draw. Right? And it works basically the same way. You're pulling something out. And so this would not be something that has radial symmetry. Usually it's something that's just symmetrical along one plane. Right? You pull it straight out. The other one, which I would encourage you to use every time you think cylinder, most of the time you'd be better off with a sweep. And so the icons here are really useful. If you pay attention and look at the icons in Cinema 4D, they tell you a lot about how the object works. And so the extrude takes one primitive and extrudes it out. The sweep, if you look at it here, takes two primitives, and it drags one along the other. I have one spline here. I'm going to make the sweep, which is right here. I'll put this in there. Nothing yet, because the sweep requires two splines for the sweep, one spline for the extrude. I'm going to take the one I use instead of a circle. Even when I want a circle, I'm going to grab end side. End side allows me to adjust the circle much more easily. Right? End side meaning just as many sides as you decide. I'm going to grab the end side and put that in there. And the order matters here. Let's look at this. I need to take the end side and dial it down as far as how big it is. There you can start to see what it's doing. And I'm going to change the plane. There we go. So now you can see what's happened here. It took that end side and traced it along the other path. Does that make sense? You see how you can get to a lot of shapes this way, right? Any shape. I want to do the pumpkin carriage, and you've got the whatever that's called, the ornate pumpkin carriage decoration. My balloon and carriage vocabulary is apparently terrible. I don't spend enough time ballooning or carriaging. I don't even know what you call that. There's probably a name for it. There's almost certainly a name for it. Anyways, make it a little bit rounder. And there we go. And the other nice thing about this is it makes it very, very easy to adjust the size of it. Or not only the size, but also the path. I come back in here to the path, right? I have a spline, so I want to grab the points to move it around. I can adjust this, and everything adjusts up the chain. So I'm able to move this as I need. I can also come here if I select the sweep. I wish this was a little bit more obvious, but under the object, everybody's getting the understanding that if you're not sure what, you're not seeing the options that you want to see, most of the time it's because you're not in the Object tab. Right? The Object tab, usually that's where most of the action is. Under Details, we have a function graph, which allows me to adjust the thickness over the length. See what's going on there? Right? And so now I have, this is the thickness over the length of the object. If you need to make another point, it is Control-click to make point. You can have as many points as you want. And so I could put one here, make it sort of fat in the middle, skinny on the end, right? So you can see this is super powerful here to sort of shape things in this way. Right, this is the sweep object. Cool, so that gives me trunk. Let's save this file, save project as trunk. We'll say whole tree. And let's get a coconut in here. Smaller. I want to adjust the scale of it, so I'm going to hit, does it need this many subdivisions? Probably not. I'm going to dial that down a little bit. Let's say 12, because it's going to be smaller. I'm going to hit C. I'm going to go into object mode and sort of scale it down like that. Coconuts are a little more oblong, right? Probably want the anchor point up at the top, you know, where the coconut attaches to the tree. So I'm going to hit anchor point tool, move this up there, undo it, turn it off rather, and maybe angle this a little bit, like so. And then maybe go in the world mode, drag one over here, rotate it the other way. Take another one, B. I'm in world mode, so it makes it easy to drag over, like so. Rotate this. Labeling things, just general housekeeping. There we go. Save. Okay, so far so good. Nice. Makes sense? Okay. The leaf. Let's look at an option here. And so what kind of file did you send me, T? Okay, it is a PNG file with an alpha channel. All right, I'm going to start Photoshop in a second here. The leaf, a thin thing, right? And in general, we want to use less polygons, not more polygons, right? Let's see, can I actually just start Photoshop, or do I need to do the whole thing? No, I seem okay, good. And so what I'm going to do here is I might, if I'm doing this from scratch, I might draw my own leaf, just take one of these. But I'm just going to grab one out of here for now. So let's say here, I'm going to get this much, and let's just go ahead and crop this. There we go. All right, so this could be any image editor. And you drew this in Illustrator, right? So you wouldn't, I'm just doing it because I don't have the Illustrator file. I'm going into Photoshop, right? Because I have the image file. If you had the Illustrator file, just go back in Illustrator. You copy paste one leaf out of there. Let's go ahead and grab another part here. There we go. So I'm just getting down to one leaf here. And now I'll go ahead and crop this. And I'll save this file as a PNG. So for flat things like this, let's say, what else would this be? Well, leaves is the one that comes to mind. I'll think of some other things here. Is that I'm going to go ahead and make a plane. Okay? And by default, the plane has a bunch of subdivisions. I don't want that right now. I just want one polygon. So I'm just going to make it a 1 by 1. Okay, so just one subdivision by one subdivision. And I'm going to make it kind of the same aspect ratio as the leaf. Cool. Now I will double click and bring in that PNG. And so I'll put it on the color channel here. Load image. I'm going to load that palm tree leaf. I do something weird when I export it. Let's see here. Oh, that looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on the plane here. And I am going to use the alpha channel. And so the alpha channel in Cinema 4D, I think this will come over, if I remember correctly. Alpha equals masking. So I'm going to load the same image. And now, if you look at this, let's put a light in here so we can see what we're doing. I've got the orientation a little bit wrong. Let's fix that. There we go. So instead of modeling this shape, because it's a flat thing, this is another technique, using the alpha channel to cut out the shape of one polygon. When I go to render, and when Unity goes to render this, it'll be that shape, right? And so for things that are totally flat, what other things would fall into this category? Street signs, right? If I had to do a stop sign, I could just take a picture of a stop sign, slap it on one polygon, with an alpha channel, good to go. If you had cardboard cutouts of people in your scene, that's bizarrely specific, but that would also work with this technique, right? Leaves is the one that comes to mind, right? Because the advantage here is that once you understand what's happening, it's pretty easy to make, right? You just take the 2D drawing and slap it onto a plane with the alpha channel, and you're good to go. So anything that's flat like this, that you're not going to need, that won't have any depth, right? The leaf is very thin. And so now, for instance, I just take this plane, I hit C on it, I move the anchor point back to the edge of the leaf. I might want to give it a little bit of bend. And so I'm going to go ahead and say KL, that loop. I was not going to find it. So I'm going to do KK. Oh, not in polygon mode. KL. There we go. So I'm going to make a cut right here. And now I can add just a little bit of bend to this part. I'm just going to grab this edge and sort of move this down. Not the anchor point, the actual edge. A little bit like that. Call this leaf. And this is extremely efficient, extremely performant, because it's just one, well, now it's 2 polygons. You can scale it down a little bit and bring this up here. Maybe it needs to get a little bit thinner, and so I'm going to grab this edge right here and hit T and scale that down. And bring the whole thing down. And so now to make my tree, you know how we did, what's the shortcut for copy drag? Control drag, right? You can do it with rotation too. So if I hold down Control when I rotate, I get, oops, I can make a copy. Make sense? What's going on there? And I can just continue to do this to make some more leaves. I don't need to be really even afraid of how many of these I would put on the tree, you know, and just sort of do as many as I would want, because they're very, very low poly. So there's not going to be a problem when we bring these into Unity. And I can come in here and just really do what I want with the leaves. Create this, you know, palm tree. Maybe all these leaves are a little bit too big. And hit T, bring them down a little bit. So, did I miss one? Yeah, this one here, T. There we go. Let's get our materials in order. And so this one is leaf. And we need one for the coconut. Make this like a light brown or something. And one for the trunk. And this goes on to the trunk. This goes on to the coconut. Drag, drag. Cool. All right, I would say our modeling process is done here. We're okay. I put that light in there. I'm going to delete that. I don't need that coming over. Cool. So far, so good, right? So what's our checklist? Someone walk me through it. What do I need to do? I got my materials in order. What's the next part? What's that? Grouping, exactly. Get the whole thing together. What's the shortcut for group? Alt-G. There we go. Need to name this thing. Palm tree. And I need to do what? What's that? Anchor point. When you're using the anchor point, be aware that when you're adjusting the object anchor point, you need to be in object mode. Otherwise, you're adjusting the anchor point of like the points you have selected or something like that. And so I would make a note of that you want to make sure you're in object mode when you're changing the anchor point. And so here, again, I'll do it in an orthographic view. The anchor point for this should clearly be on the bottom. In fact, for something like a tree, I usually like move it up a little bit so that it goes into the ground. Even if the ground goes up and down a little bit, it still goes into the ground. And so that's good. You can turn that off. And now I'm ready for exporting, right? As what type of file, Sylvia? FBX. File, export object as, FBX. Want to make sure that I absolutely do not have what checked? Cameras. No cameras. No. No lights. And okay. I want to do one more real quick, and then I'll give you guys some time to work. Let's do a quick rendition of Anna's pixelated Ford Bronco. Okay, so it's not gonna still be pixelated, but we're not going for ultra realistic meshes for the objects, right? And sort of a simplified essence of the object. Does that make sense for everybody? Right? As far as games go, the game I'm playing with my boy all the time right now is Overcooked, right? Overcooked, everything has that like simplified style, simplified. All right, so this one, we want to bring it in. Let me just check on the stream. All right. How do I get to the settings to bring in the background? Not Celeste. I know Celeste is taking good notes. I want to bring in the picture as reference so I can use it to trace in Cinema. What? The back tab? Shift V. Shift V. Okay? Make sure you got that one. I'm going to bring in this image, Anna's image of the Bronco here. Cool. And let's go ahead and turn down the transparency a little bit. And we'll go with that for now. Okay, so now this is a really great candidate. I told you we were going to use the sweep, which we just did to make the trunk, right? And that was easy. What else would be good for the sweep? Anything that has long radial symmetry, usually. Pipes, tree trunks, worms, snakes. Like a cylinder would get the job done on like a flagpole, but anything that would be twisty, right? The thorns, that kind of stuff. Here, the Bronco body, not the same thing, right? It's essentially the side view she drew it from is essentially that shape across the body of the Bronco, right? And so we're going to draw the side of the Bronco and then extrude it into the shape of the Bronco. And for a lot of 2D things, this will work really well. Let's go ahead and use the Spline Pen Tool as a way to do this. And we will do this. I'll bring it a little in here. There we go. Up. So this is going to get rounded. For rounded areas, I'm going to round it afterwards. I'm just going to put a point in the middle of the rounded part. So I'll put a point there, come back to here, come over here, and again put it, well, this one's a little bit longer. So I'll put a point here, and here, 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 there. Okay, makes sense so far? Now the general gist is that I'm going to take this extrude object, dump this spline in there, and now I'll be able to, using the offset, extrude this into more or less the shape I need for my car, at least certainly the starting point. Make sense? Right? Now let's clean up the spline a little bit first so that it more faithfully represents. So a few tricks. When you start addressing your spline, to do anything with the points, you need to make sure that you are in point mode. Point mode. Let's go ahead, and often I have things like this where, you know, I was clicking and drawing, and these 2 points, I want them to be equal. I need to align these 2 points. The good shortcut for this is T for scale, and that will scale between the points, and then hold down Shift. And if you make it 0, there you go. We've flattened those 2 points, so they're both together. So again, I'll do that. I'll come in here with the select tool. I want this one and this one together. Hit T, hold down Shift, so get it down to 0. There we go. And then if I wanted to shift those up and down, I could do that there. And these 2 points here, I'm going to grab these, hit T, and bring these down. Hit E, move this down. There we go. Okay, that's pretty good for now. Oh, let's flatten the top of the car, I guess. And so over here, I'm going to go ahead and grab this one, and hit T, and Shift, and 0. There we go. Nice. All right, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and round some of the corners that we want to round. And so when you're just using the pen tool to click and get the shape, it makes points that are just linear. If you right-click on them, you can change from, you know, the linear interpolation to Bezier handles, which will smooth out this point. And so I'm going to go with this point selected, the one I wanted to round out. Again, I need to make sure I'm in point mode, otherwise this right menu won't be the correct one. Say soft. There we go. And so now I get the Bezier handle. And this is make sure I have the spline selected. This is, I can't believe this is still a thing. This is incredibly irritating. So, public service announcement. In order to adjust the Bezier handles, you must be in the Move tool to adjust Bezier. It's really frustrating at the beginning. I don't think they should show you the Bezier handles unless you can click on them. However, if you are in the Select tool and select this, it'll show you the Bezier handle, and any reasonable person would think, oh, I can click on that, but you can't. You need to be in the Move tool to adjust the Bezier handle. That can be frustrating. And so I can do the same thing over here. These two right here. And so I'm going to grab this one and this one, right click and say soft interpolation. That'll round that out a little bit. If you want to break the Bezier handles in Cinema 4D, it is Shift. I think it's Control in After Effects. Is that right? I forget. Right, so if you hold down Shift when you're dragging the handle, it'll break the two handles so that they don't exactly. Cool, so let's see how this goes. I'm going to go ahead and hit NB so I can see the polygons here. And there we go. Like, I have a pretty good starting shape for my car. Makes sense so far? Let's label this Bronco. Let's do a few more things. So now that's a little wonky right there. Let's fix that. So sometimes if I'm just not getting the flow I like, less points is better than more points. And so in this case, I'm just going to make that 1 point and then adjust these handles a little bit. Kind of like so. And so now this is my starting point for the car shape. So it makes sense. You can get to a lot of different shapes this way, just by tracing the 2D thing and pulling it out into 3D. Make sense here? I tried to pick 3 objects that, between these 3 different approaches, the radial balloon, the sweep trunk, the extrude car, most things you could get to with these techniques. Let's use this as our starting point. And so now, in order to do some more work here, I'm going to hit C on this extrude, and that turns it into polygons. And so now, for instance, I can use all my polygon tools. So for instance, I'm going to say KL, which is that loop cut tool. Actually, another one that's pretty useful here is KK, which is cut from point to point. So I'll do that, hit escape. And so that allows me, I'm in point mode here. I just want to create one more cut between here and here, escape. Why do I want to do that? Because I want to make the windows. And KL for loop cut. Let's see if this finds it. Yeah. I'm going to say KK. What does her design look like here? All right, yeah, so there's like a door here. And so we could do it over here. KK. And I want to make sure I cut through the whole object. Make sure this is off. So I'm going to go from KK from here to here, escape, to there. Right, so when the topology follows the shape, that's better. Probably not as fat on the roof, so I'm going to go ahead and grab these polygons and just scale them down a little bit. Give it a little bit of shaping, like so. And let's do the windows. The windows, we'll do one more new thing. And so here, I kind of want to inset a window. I is inner extrude. So watch what inner extrude does. Pulls in, right? And then this one right here, both extrude and inner extrude have this preserve groups. It's important to know whether this is on or off. Sometimes, depending, in this case, I want each one separate. And so I'm going to turn this off. I don't want it all to be one group that goes around the whole car. I want each panel to be its own inset. And so when I turn this off, boom. Now I've got inset. And now I can hit D and bring this in a little bit. and create my windows. I am going to save this. I already did. There we go. Cool. Making sense? Yes.
Is there any way to make, like, is there any shortcut to make it look like the pixel art that you needed?
So, like Minecraft, like a 3D
Yeah,
pixel?
kinda like that.
Yeah,
Is there,
so
like, a shortcut for that?
no, there's no shortcut for that. You would, yeah, you would voxelize that. When you do that in 3D, it's called voxelization, voxelization. And there's some different approaches to doing that kind of Minecrafty thing, but to make it all look like that, usually people are making those voxelization, like the Minecraft tools are designed to be done in Minecraft. We're going to get to something that gets to that later. Like for instance, in here, volume builder takes something and fills the volume of the object with squares, right? And so if you turned up the size of the squares, you could start to get to something like that. But you see how you would have to sort of model with that in mind, right? And so we can talk about that kind of stuff as we go along. This week, I kind of want everyone just to make a regular thing first, right? And then go from there.
Like an image that is pixelated and then put it on as
Yeah, that would, you could do that. That wouldn't look all that great. I can't think of an instance where that's the thing. Like the sides of it would look pixelated, but in 3D, as you moved around it, it would be obvious that it's not a bunch of squares, you know. So yeah. And then we need some wheels, right? So what do we need for a wheel? What's going to get us closest to a wheel right away?
Horse?
We want the tire and the wheel are going to be one piece of geometry. And so if we want to shape one thing to get to that. Cylinder, yeah, a cylinder. Yeah, if I wanted to do separate tires, but again, we're going for simplified versions of this stuff this week, right? So I'm going to go to torus, and I'm going to do it just like we did before in that we don't need to make 4 wheels in here. We can just make one, and when we bring it over to Unity, we can duplicate the wheel, right? And I'm going to make it face the correct direction, which is this direction. There we go. And bring it over right here, and get this. Let's get the proportions right. It's hard to tell. Somewhere around there. And the height, and something like that. We don't need height segments. Make that like that. There we go. E, bring this over. Go like this. Cool, and we can shape this with the same kind of tools. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and hit C, U-L, and I can make an inner extrude. Oops, in this case I want to, what's wrong? Right now it's treating each one as its own polygon, and so I need to check which box. Exactly, preserve groups. That'll give me what I want here. Can drag that in, kind of like so. So that'll create my tire. D, extrude this in. Now you could have some fun as far as like I, bring it in. You can create your own rims here. I, Right, so I and D will get you a long way towards creating tires and wheels. There we go. And then what I don't want it to look quite so blocky here. What do we use to round the edge? Bevel. The bevel, purple bevel deformer. So bevel here, make it a child of the wheel. There we go. And what settings did I recommend for bevel? 2 on the subdivision, 1, 2. And then the distance, trying to find a distance that works. Maybe I wanted some more radial subdivisions, but yeah, we're probably going to be seeing it from like that far. It probably works. Make sure the anchor point is in the center of the wheel. Let's check the object anchor point. That is correct. The anchor point of the Bronco, we probably want it at the bottom of the chassis, or this is the, whatever, it's the chassis and the body. E, anchor point tool, move that there. There we go. Like I said, we can duplicate the wheel over there. And here, I'm going to go ahead and make some materials. I want the window to be a separate color. Try to name this. Here we go. Window. I want the body color, like some sort of orange for now. I need a tire color. And I need a wheel color. There we go. So now I'm going to come in here to wheel. I'm going to need to turn this into one object because of the bevel here. Well, let's try it. If I come back up here, what's a loop select? I want to select this whole loop of polygons. U loop L, exactly. UL gives me that. I can select inside. And so that's the wheel color. And then UI, just like we did with our donut, so everything else is the tire color. Over here in the Bronco, all the windows are already selected. I'm going to put the window color on there. And then UI for everything else, and put the body color on there. Make sense? So as you think about your objects that you need to make in your scene, based on the 3 techniques we just looked at, right? Let's call it radial technique, sweep technique, and extrude technique. Between those 3 techniques, any objects that stick out in your object inventory that you don't have any idea about how you would make it. As you go through the objects that you're going to use to convert your 2D scene into your 3D scene, is there anything from everybody's list that you're like, I don't see how I would do that at all based on what we just did? What's that?
So mine is, I think, different from everyone's because it's more of like a point of view type of thing.
You just posted it, right?
Yeah. So would I have to like make the whole bow or?
Just do points, vectors.
Yeah, so I would say,
Let's still go for the same thing.
yeah, you still want to make the boat. So a boat, I'm going to use a cube and kind of get some boat proportions here. And the thing about the boat is that we definitely want to have a cut right in the middle, right? And so before I hit C, I'm going to, in the Z X direction, add an extra run, hit MB, in the Z direction, there we go. Kind of like so. All right, so that's a pretty good starting point. I'm going to hit C. And now I'm going to put it in the smoother, the subdivision surface. All right, let's go from there. So now, let's move some of this stuff around. I'm going to grab this endpoint and dial that out a bit. I'm going to grab this one, move this out a bit. I'm going to take the top polygon, or top two, and scale these out. There we go. And then your bottom polygons, maybe scale those down and move them down a little bit. And now I'm going to take these top two. We need to make the inner part of the boat. We need to inset. It's going to be which key? Inner extrude I. Not you, yeah, just I, exactly. So I'll bring that in. D, bring it down a little bit. Actually, I'll do two here. I, D, I. See how every time I press I and D, the shape gets more defined, right? It's because of the way the subdivision surface smoothing works. Right, so there I'm getting closer. Here and here. Go ahead and move this down a little bit. This point, I kind of got off center. Down. And let's move some of these forward. Here and here. I'm going to move those forward a little bit. Over here and here. And move those forward a little bit or back. Just these. There we go. And now I have some polygons in here. In polygon mode again. Here and here. I'm going to in and extrude again here. So grab both of these. I. And then this inner part I'm going to reshape. So hit T. So these are all, I'm just sequencing the tools we already know about. So I'm making that more of like the center of the boat area. I. D. It's a little. Now it's like the car, right? Windows. So I. Make sure preserve groups is off. Let's come in here. See, I definitely want to preserve some of these groups, in which case you may just need to do it by hand. So let's just say here and here.
Now it looks like no.
Yeah, the smoothing on it a little bit.
Can you now make that part flat?
Yeah, so at this point, we use the smoothing to sort of get our shape here, right? And so now at this point, I kind of like this, and I don't want any more of the automatic smoothing. So I'm going to hit C, so that now I'm working with these polygons. Actually, before I hit C, I'm going to make it not 2 subdivisions, but just 1. There we go. Gives me a little bit less, because I might smooth it again, right? So hit C. There we go. And so now I can do this, right? So I can grab this one, I want to keep those together actually. D, grab these, I, D, these are all the same tools. Same stuff over here, probably all these, maybe one window. So all that, I, D. Right, and so now, yeah, now you have the whole boat, so you can put all your stuff in the boat here that you would need, right? If you wanted some of this to be a little bit further, you know, if you need some more room here, you could grab some of these and stretch them out in that direction, but the other way that comes to mind is from the top view, draw a boat shape. There we go. Extrude this. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit C on this, and then grab the bottom to create the, slope. There's probably a name for this as well. I don't know what it is. Of the hull. This seems to be a little bit faster. And then same thing here. Now I've got this I have too many points over here, so my extrude's a little bit D. And then, if I wanted to have more control, I could just start shaping this as a separate part. Maybe the second way was less confusing.
I feel like the first part you just showed off. I was like,
But yeah, so they're right. Yeah, the boat shape doesn't quite fit either one, but here you just sort of draw the outline of the boat from the top, and then just scale the bottom. I mean, the second one made sense, right? Any other shapes? Like the other one Celeste had was the UFO, right? And so UFOs are fun, really easy, because, traditional UFOs, whatever that even means. Where's the cylinder? Here. Let's give it a little bit less subdivisions. Let's say 12. 1, with the same tools, hit C on this, put it inside a subdivision surface, and that sort of swoopy UFO look can be fun to make. So UL, I, bring this in, D, bring this up. Yeah. Same thing here. If you grab this, UL, I, D, right? And then you can do things, grab like every other one, and do the I, D, and sort of create some different you can get to these sort of shapes pretty quickly. You can have a lot of fun with that one. So maybe you should all put UFOs in your scene. And so for the carriage, right, some sort of pumpkin that you shape here. The pumpkin's a little bit tougher, right? And so here, I'm going to hit C. Actually, I'm going to make it a little bit less. I have this. You want all that filigree. I think that's the word I was looking for earlier. So sketch this. Something like that, but smoother, right? And sweep. So end side, make it very small. Say 1. Put it inside the sweep. May have to change the plane on it a little bit so that there it is. It would have wanted to turn up the smoothing a little bit, but now that whole thing here right, I have the whole part. R, Control R. I got 2 of them. E, Control drag. Make sense there? Cool. Okay. Yes.
How would you do
Clouds?
clouds?
So, okay. Yeah, so completely amorphous. 2 things I would write down. There's a specific list of things here. This one, this is important, the volume builder. The volume builder, this is what I used to look at the voxelization earlier, but you can use the volume builder to mush shapes together into, but this is good for clouds, maybe a pile of rocks, objects that are not very geometric. I'm going to take a sphere and just start control dragging it, sort of rough out some cloud shape. Okay, there we go. So kind of a cloud shape, but doesn't look that good because you can tell it's just like a bunch of spheres, right? It'd be great if we could mush them all into the thing. I'm gonna grab them all and put them underneath the volume builder. And this will voxelize all of it. Now with the sphere, actually, I'm gonna go in and turn up the segments so that they're a little bit smoother. And then click on the volume builder. Volume builder is really cool. We're going to get into this some more. You see all the stuff I put in here? You can put anything in here. It doesn't have to be spheres. It could be any piece of geometry. Right? So put a cube in here like this, right? And as long as it becomes underneath, it gets voxelized and put into the mush. And it works kind of like compositing. You have all these things and you can mush them together or you can cut holes with them. And almost always down here there's a button for smoothing. I'm going to click that. And so now it smooths all that stuff. So now, look at that, right? Now we're talking. However, it's not there because it's not geometry. It is a field of boxes, right? That's what voxelization is. That's what Minecraft is, right? This idea, you take something and you fill the volume with voxels or shapes. And so you need to put two other objects here. The bottom is the volume builder. We need to turn it into a mesh. And so you need the volume mesher. I'll grab the volume mesher, put the volume builder in the volume mesher. Now I got a mesh. But when I hit NB, it's a little heavy. Yeah. And so we're going to finish this off with another object, Shift C, called remesh. Okay, so this is the magic formula here. Go ahead and take a shot of this with your phones or write it down. This is the formula for taking shapes and mushing them together, right? You would take everything that you want mushed together and put it underneath volume builder. And then it would voxelize it, mesh it, and then remesh essentially cleans it up for you, right? And so here it is with the volume mesher, and you can see, you guys know enough now that you can look at this and be like, that's not an ideal mesh. Like, it's not terrible for Monday. If you had to use it, it would work, but I mean, it's not something you'd want to repeat 100 times in your game, right? But when I turn on the remesh object, watch what happens. This is really recent, like the last couple of years, this sort of algorithmic retopology, right? You're retopologizing. You're reorganizing the polygons on the surface of the object. That's what the remesh object does. It's kind of magic, right? Look at that, because what's the best kind of polygon? A quad. And so it's redone it to all quads. And then the remesh only has one slider that you really need to care about, mesh density. And so you could hand that off to someone else, and they'll be like, yeah, that cloud looks good, but there's too many polygons. And then so you can just do that, and now there's less. Or turn it down even more, and there we go. That's less. And it's all still editable. So if I need to move some of the stuff in the cloud, you can move it And do I have the right thing selected? Let's see. I'll move this one. It recomputes the whole way back up. Does that make sense? So for any sort of very irregular shape, this, a rock, clouds, what else would work through this? What's that?
Like in the background.
Yep, yeah, sure, like a mountain. I mean, there, yeah.
What about these kinds of treetops that I did?
Yeah, exactly, right? You could take, like, just move this around a little bit. And, now I got the remesh here.
You can also use the magnet tool to make it look more organic.
Okay, so if you wanted to further sculpt the remesh with the magnet tool, you would want to hit C on that. Then you can come in and start to move all of those, further move the points around. Okay, you wouldn't be able to do that while it's still in the other form. Yeah, that's a good question. I think between those four things, let's just take inventory of that, right? So our four techniques: extrude, spline. What did we make with that? We made the boat, we made the car, objects that have symmetry in one axis. We did the smooth geometry, which is the subdivision surface. And we did the balloon with that. We did the long, thin, radial, and that was the sweep technique, right? That was the tree trunk, right? And so Celeste, your tree there would be a combination. You would use the sweep technique for the trunk, and then probably this last one, which we'll call the remesh technique, remesh, and this is, irregular shapes. So, to clarify our thinking, our four techniques are extrude, sweep, subd, and remesh. So I'm going to change the assignment slightly. For Monday, I want you to make all the meshes. On Monday, we'll go over bringing them into Unity and setting up the scene in Unity. But for Monday, let's just model all the stuff. Okay? And yeah, let's say the scene has whatever you did for your own 2D scene, right? And so let's say that you have to make meshes for all of the sprites. Essentially, you're a sprite to mesh converter this weekend. Also known as 3D modeler. Yes?
How do you change like the size of the magnet brush or magnet tool? Is it?
it is a little tricky. Let's see. C. Remember, you have to have them all selected, and then it's Shift, press, hold mouse wheel, and drag. Or if you just press MI, it's this slider right here, the radius. You can dial it up and down. Right there. But the shortcut is Shift, mouse wheel. Press, hold mouse wheel. So what I want everybody to have for Monday is a folder full of C4D files and FBXs that are ready to come into Unity. And on Monday, we'll set them up in there. Because the good news is, all the scripts and animation techniques you use to animate your 2D scene will almost all translate right over to the 3D scene. Right? You'll have Z coordinates now that you may want to animate. But besides that, it should be good. So you have half an hour. Pick an object and try to get through modeling it here. And I'll walk around and help everybody as you get stuck. All right? So pick an object. One, I would pick an easy one to start, right? And one where it clearly maps on to one of those 4 approaches. Turn off my caps lock when I'm talking to the chat. Any questions? Any questions? Are you okay? Yes, so you have the boat. What else was in that scene?
Boat.
So you wanted to make it look
No,
low,
give us a
retro a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Boat. This was the box, boat, anchor, water, and clouds.
So how are you going to do the anchor?
The spline one for the bottom half, and then add it to
I mean, it's flat, right?
yeah.
And so from that, it's like you just use the extrude. You just draw your anchor. Right?
Oh, yeah,
And
huh.
just pull it out just a little bit.
And then round it out, make it look more. Okay.
The road, that's one you're going to want to use the speed. That way you can draw the path of the road, and then
And then make it thicker, so that it's thicker. Okay.
Exactly.
So-
So did this seem to make the whole idea of making stuff in 3D more approachable? Yeah? a lot of things should fit into that. All right, so check this out. Rigid body plus collider. So, a little cheesy at the end, but the world building part of it, right? Seeing the world like that, like what are the basic shapes that are being used here to sort of composite everything together. This was made, I mean, how old is this now? Yeah, I mean, it's been on the internet since 2009. Over 10 years old, geez, at this point. And yeah, so we have some virtual reality stuff too that hopefully we're going to be able to use later this semester. So a lot of this, in some ways, like this stuff is here, like sort of making things in that way. But yeah, it's called World Builder. But sort of as you're just walking around, you know, the composite shapes that you would use to put things together like that. Hopefully that doesn't get the stream taken down. Let's see. I'm not sure if it will or not. Yes. Okay, so yeah, so you're that's just the online. It's not how many days are left. It's just every once in a while it needs to check in. Like if you if you used it without the internet, right? And so don't worry about that. That's not how many days left. The number of days left is that day. Yeah. Yeah. So you'll need to do it at the end of the month, right? Or what day is it? Yeah, it's the 15th, right? So when it gets closer to 9/29, you'll need to go back and do the process again. The one that's in the technology login junk for the, remember, did you take it in the spring or the summer? Spring, yeah. So that's why yours is expiring now. So you'll need to just at the end of the month when it expires, when you can bring it. So if you go to campus. It has the instructions in the technology log. Yeah, so just on your there. So this stuff. On like the 28th or so. Because we set it for every 6 months.
So after that, you have to have another 6 months.
Right, it's only for 6 months, and you started it for the other class in January, right? Oh. Okay, so yeah, I think you're fine.
The license for the spring semester has already expired for the semester.
You did it? Okay, so press the X here. That's okay. yeah, and so this way, right? And
Yeah.
so that's this plane. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Like
Can
it's a sine thing.
for the carriage, can I use the same like pumpkin shape? Or just the one pumpkin?
Yeah, yeah. Are you connected to the right Wi-Fi? Try to close it once and restart. So let me try one thing real quick. So much lower geometries. Look at the shape.
Yeah.
Pumpkin images, right? And by doing it one at a time, you'll get a little bit of variation there, right? It won't all be the unbelievable. Try that. Nice. So you have two of them. Yeah, you don't need to do it again. I mean, you have two. Just this one and this one. So I think you're fine, right? Just say, if one expires and you have another one, it'll just go to this one. And so I think you're going to be fine till then. So just say, okay. Is this the only computer you use, or do you have another one? You just use this one?
Yeah, the only one that has the latest version.
Right, yeah, I mean, you can move your license back and forth, like you, right, so now you just use this one? Yeah, so when that one runs out, you do have the new one, so I think it's just good to get that. Okay? Alright, so what are you making?
A chocolate bar.
That's pretty easy.
I know, you didn't just say to pick an easy one. I was gonna do my car, but I was like, yeah.
Yeah, okay, the chocolate bar, yeah, that one's super easy,
Should
right?
I was trying to.
Try the car. Bring in the car picture so you can trace it. I mean, we got the process for the car. Remember, it's all on tape. What are you making now? NB. What do you mean? Okay, yeah. So yeah, with the B, so I put it in C and then KL for loop cut. And so with the different parts, whatever it is, a B is an insect, right? So it's 3 body parts. Is that right? Who's taking biology? What other classes do you guys take? I asked my other, no one's taking astronomy, no one's taking biology. What did you guys take for sciences?
Still ahead in the back.
For sciences, I have psychology, and then I'm taking human nutrition.
Nutrition is a separate science class? Okay. So like this would be the part where it comes together. So you want one cut for skinny, one cut for fat. Fat part, skinny part. Fat part, skinny part, fat part. Right? And so now on the fat parts, right here, say UL and T. UL T. UL T. Right, and then UL T. Right, and then when you use the subdivision surface for the smoothing, you want the thing under the subdivision surface to have as few polygons as possible. That way it makes it much easier to manipulate the shape. Right, here I could come in, move this back, there we go. So now, right, take this one, grab this one, yeah, grab this one. Right, see how easy this becomes when there's much less to deal with in terms of the, right, and so if I want this fat part to be fatter here, you know, I can UL T, move this up. And then, oh, the B wing, how are you going to do that? What do you guys think? Suggestions for Gretel, B wing.
Maybe what we did with the leaf.
Exactly, exactly what we did with the roof. Exactly, right? Because it doesn't need to have a lot of geometry. It's pretty much just a flat part, right? Exactly. Like you just said that?
This is the second time it said that this class, and I checked license manager.
Maybe they're doing some. Oh, Christine ran into this last night. Yeah, it seems like they did something so that it comes home more often. I mean, yours says what, 9?
9:15.
And then 12:2. As you close up, or we just say okay, what is it?
Didn't say this last time. The 59 minutes remaining.
Yeah, someone got that yesterday. I mean, can you keep working? No? Does it let you keep doing stuff? Yeah, I think they're just doing something with the license manager right now. Because someone else got this yesterday. Well, your date is probably due for the semester, so you're good.
Yeah, it was just weird. It's like I can still work.
Yeah. Yeah, just keep going. They did something so that it doesn't. I don't know. But you're fine.
Okay.
And so you're making what now?
I'm starting to orange.
Oh, okay.
Taking the stepper down.
How did you make the bottom?
So you gotta go into polygon mode. There you go. And so scale the polygon, T.
Oh, it was T.
Yeah. And the move, scale, rotate tools, they do move, scale, rotation for either objects and follows the edges. What are you making of that? A house? Like a circle house? Oh, okay. The cake house, yeah. What, let me see the picture again. So it's like two levels, right? Can you make it bigger? Okay, yeah, so that's what you need to do first is inner extrude the top and then extrude again. So do that first. UL. And I. Click and drag. Not on the axis, just off of it. Other way, other way. There you go. And then what's next? You need to extrude it up deep. Yeah, so here, Control Z back before you did anything, point it out. Yeah, so you don't wanna, see how when you let go, if you did it again, you don't want that to happen. You wouldn't go, yeah, so try it again, do the inner extrude first. You really wanna make sure it's just one step.
How do you make this other stuff to make it? Just want to straight.
Let me change this a little bit.
Since I wanted this part to be curved. Because
Right.
usually like Illustrator, you just press it again and it stops doing the curve.
Yeah.
It keeps going.
I would just draw on all of the lines and go back and select the ones that you want to.
Oh, okay.
Right, so just rough out the lines first and then select them.
Right. How many is that one top? Like top plans? What do you use as the first one?
Yeah, I would say the cylinder. So you have polygons on the bottom, right? So go ahead and grab the bottom. So maybe UL, you select. And then, yeah, turn it over so you can see the bottom. There you go. Grab that, and hit T. And scale it down. Okay, so on the older version here, this is not all connected. So just say Control A, right click, and say Object Lines. Actually, here, click on Points. Points, do Control A. And do another object. Okay, so now do the view object. that part selected. So you hold down shift. Shift click will add to the selection, control click will remove from the selection. Matthew, what are you making?
I am trying to make something.
Can you be more specific?
Is there a reason why I can't put an image in?
Oh, you're seeing the perspective. You want the one that was there. Yeah. I mean, which image are you putting?
Already was in the thing.
Wait, what is it? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so the left side. Let's see, icing. So did you do all of them or just every other one? Let me see here. Like, what's one of the objects that you have in your scene, Matthew?
I had a sphere.
Like a ball? Were,
Yeah.
were there any more complicated objects?
I mean, I was just trying to figure out how to do the mesh thing again.
You have to export it as an FBX.
No, sorry. What I meant is I'm trying to figure out how to,
Convert it to a mesh?
squish the darn thing.
Yeah, you have to hit C first
Yeah.
to convert it to a mesh.
I forgot.
Monday. Bye.
When I put the face in there, should I pretty much do what you did with the windows? For the carving of the pumpkin face?
Let me try something here first. Hold on. Okay, I think this is better. This pumpkin's kind of a... So I'm gonna grab just those outside ones, points.
Okay.
I'm gonna move those out.
Oh, I just use the ones. Every other point?
That's right. I'm gonna grab every other set and then move them out. And then same thing here. I'm not grabbing the ones at the top or bottom, right? Just sort of keep those in place. Let's do one more. And let's see what that looks like. Not that one. That's better. Yeah, I think that'll look good.
Okay.
Because now I'll be able to, you know, if I want the whole object, I squish it a little bit here, right? And then it could grab just that top point right here. Move it down. That looks much better.
Okay.
Does that make sense what I did there?
Yeah.
Right, so just grabbing, I make sure I have an even number, so probably 12 subdivisions, right? 12 subdivisions around, and then just grab every other one and just move the points out. And then put it in the subdivision, and you have to, I think that's simpler, yeah. And so then,
Yeah, the faces.
so I've got some splines. I will extrude these. You need to group them together first.
Okay.
I'll cheat. You gotta press, it won't, right? It's not gonna do it if they're not grouped. Let me just make sure that's right. This button right here, make a note of that one. In the extrude, once you have multiple splines, you gotta check this button.
Okay.
It should be checked by default. I don't know why it's not. Okay, so if you, when you're drawing, if you just make sure that this is still selected,
Okay.
it'll keep adding it to that one object, which makes everything much simpler. Right? And so I draw, I close the shape out, I start drawing again. Yeah, okay. It all is going, see how it's all getting into one object there? Right, so that's what I want. There we go. Now it's all just one thing, and so this should not be a problem when I do that. Cool. The magic here is this object. So the bool, short for Boolean, right? Add, subtract.
Okay.
And so you're going to subtract. If it doesn't look right, switch the order because it's subtraction.
Okay.
And so it's taking this shape and subtracting it
Okay.
from the other shape. If we put on this on the other side, over here. There we go. Right. Right, so move every other point, set of points. Make sure you put it in the subdivision. And then, yeah, it's just draw the face, but make sure all the splines. If you keep that spline selected while you're drawing, it should put them all in the same.
Okay.
You want to have just one spline of it, so you don't have to deal with all that. And then you extrude that shape, and then the subtraction makes sense, right? You just subtract
Right,
one
yeah.
shape from another shape.
So
You cut a hole.
how you did the little things for the carriage? Did you record that?
Yeah, that's all on the screen recording, which I am closing right now, so it'll go up online.
Just
So
so I
end
can-
stream.
Like I watched you do it, but I'm one of those like I have to go back and be like,